Hello and welcome to another episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff. I'm Mike Evans.
And I'm David Price.
And David, today what are we going to be talking about?
It's the Marantz PM-10 integrated amplifier.
And what a beast it is.
Yeah.
As well, my gosh. And you know, it's funny because it says it's an integrated, and I suppose technically speaking it is because it's all in one box.
Yeah.
But it kind of isn't, is it? Because it's almost sort of three boxes in one, if that makes sense. So they're trying to sort of hit that balance of having a preamp and two mono power amps, which is sort of like the hi-fi aficionado's dream, isn't it?
Yeah, so remind us how many preamps and power amps you've got, Mike.
About 500,000, I think. So
in your main system,
so
perhaps you can, let's count them.
So it's box heaven, isn't it? So there's an active crossover, preamp, power supply for the preamp, power supply for the active crossover, power amp for the treble, power amp for the mid-range, power amp for the bass. I think that's about it. You know, and in that you get this huge stack of things.
Yeah, I've lost count.
Yes, exactly. Me too.
So basically, the Marantz is exactly the kind of amplifier you wouldn't buy.
Yeah, although it's crazy, isn't it? Because what it's done is it's taken all the amplifiers which I would buy and put them into one box.
Yes,
they're all. The point I'm making is that's exactly what they've done, and they're all very discreet.
Yeah.
So the preamp is very discreet to the power amps. It's even got its own linear power supply.
Yeah.
And then the power amps are monoblocks.
Yep.
So you know, dual mono if you like.
Dual mono construction inside. Yeah.
So what's not to like?
Yeah.
You know,
so
they've thought about this.
If you think that you've got the exposure active system that you just described, and then you've got a Nate 1. So there's the exposure, there's the Nate 1, you know, on the other kind of the opposite. So you're Mr. All or Nothing, aren't you?
Oh God,
in amplifier terms.
I know, yeah.
And I think the Marantz is like kind of right down the middle, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. And the irony is, the Marantz is the one I probably should buy.
Yes,
that would be the really sensible choice, the grown-up choice.
It wouldn't
it?
Be exactly that,
because it's a bruiser of an amplifier.
Yes,
I mean it is it's a two-man lift.
It is. Much. Yeah, it's 22 kilograms nearly.
Yeah.
So
and it feels every bit of that. But you know, so it should be the perfect amp. But for some reason, I'm not going to be changing my exposure kit or even my Nate for it. And I think it's going to be quite a hard one to explain why, to be honest, because it doesn't really do anything wrong.
Well, I think we need to look at your psychological issues, Mike.
Yes. That's the truth, isn't it? That's the truth. There's
we're going to explain why. You don't want a 200 watt RMS per channel into 8 ohms, 400 into 4 amp. And instead want 1,000 boxes in one room, and then a tiny sort of shoebox amp in another.
And you have to do sort of some psychoanalysis
to
find out the reason why.
I'm not sure even Freud would go there.
He wouldn't take me on, would he? No, he wouldn't take me on.
So,
and also, I mean, the other things is the exposures and the names. Bearing in mind how old they are, I mean, the build quality is very much on a bench in the kitchen.
Yes.
Whereas the build quality on this PM10 is to die for.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't see any joins or seams. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous bit of kit.
Yeah.
And then things like the little things like the way the volume control's weighted.
Yeah.
And the way the input selector works, and a really posh remote control, gorgeous remote control. Which does everything, not like the rubbish remotes which we tend to get with some of our hi-fi these days, the generic plastic bits of rubbish. Proper gorgeous, well thought out remote. So why am I not liking it? Well, it's not fair. Why am I not swapping all of my kit for it?
Well, it's because you're weird, Mike.
Well, quite possibly.
But no, I mean, I think you're making a great point, actually. So, and I probably would say the same as you. So, it's a very expensive amp. It's £7,000. It's beautifully built, as you said. It's Japanese superfi quality, basically. You can put it against any Japanese amplifier ever made, at any price, and it wouldn't come away wanting in terms of the quality of finish. And then if you look inside, it's just like a kind of list of designer label brands of passive components, and it's just beautiful.
Balanced preamp, engineer's dream. The way it's laid out, it's just glorious. Yeah. It's just fantastic. Yeah. So, bags of power. It will drive any speaker you chuck at it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just got unlimited power, which you'd expect with the hefty old build it is.
Yeah. So I think the answer to your question is that it wasn't designed for you or I. So I was at the original press launch of this, I think in 2018. It seems so long ago now with all the sort of lockdown stuff. And I think Ken Ishiwata was there, and he was making this point exactly, that this was designed to give the kind of performance, the kind of power as well, and power delivery of two large Marantz monoblocks of the previous generation, with a separate preamplifier. So you basically go from having three massive boxes that weigh 21 kilograms, to one that weighs 21 kilograms, and I think that there are some people who would rather have three amplifiers, massive amplifier boxes like you in your main listening room, plus all the power supplies, crossover, preamp, etc. But a lot of people, want to have something that puts out a massive amount of power in a reasonably compact space. I mean, compact compared to Superfi standards, not compared to your mum's microsystem. This was really the design brief of the PM-10. So they took it very seriously, but in order to do that, they had to make it a Class D amplifier.
Yes.
And as far as I can remember, this was the first Marantz Class D, high-end proper hi-fi Class D. And Marantz threw the kitchen sink at it. They really did it well. Very importantly, in my view, it's got 4 Ncore Class D modules. Now, anyone who's kind of followed Class D over the years knows that there have been many different Class D modules over the years. You can actually buy them from companies like Philips or B&O or whatever. The various different versions of these things. But the Ncore modules were always thought to be the best. They're made by Hypex and designed by a guy who I interviewed a while back called Bruno Putzis, who was a complete
it's
boff.
Great name.
It's a great name, and it's like a boffin name, isn't it?
Yes.
And he was a boffin. He
Excellent.
Just needed a white coat with a pen in his. It would have been perfect. But so the Hypex Ncore Class D modules are great. I think they're the best sounding Class D modules that I've heard, and the Marantz, I think, is one of the best implementations of the best, one of the the best Class D modules. So it's I
mean, the reason why I have multiple boxes was because, and I guess this goes back to Name Audio days with Julian Verica. With this, you don't want to put all your components in one box because you'll get noise, and it'll it won't be as it won't sound as good as if you separate everything. But actually, they've paid a lot of attention to separating everything as well, haven't they? With it, so it is like 3 boxes in one.
It is literally that. So the power amplifiers are physically separated, as is the preamp. Each has their own power supply, so it's kind of like 2 monoblock power amps and a preamp sort of shrunk into one box, isn't it?
It is, yes.
And one very nice, beautifully finished box.
Yes. So go on. You still haven't answered my $1 million question: is why am I not buying it, and why am I keeping all my 10-box system and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, well, I think it's because you're a gadget collector, Mike. So it's a great question, and some people want to do it all high-end integrated, and actually the genre of do it all high-end integrated is very popular in Japan. When I lived there, I used to knew several audiophiles who had these sort of massive Sansui Class A integrated, which were sort of vast and huge, and they'd be playing in them with kind of tanoidal concentrics and a Thoran's turntable or something, and living in these tiny apartments was 8 Tamimat, very small apartments, So it's a certain kind of type of thing, but in the UK especially, there's always been this kind of tradition that you start off with your kind of NAD 3020, don't you?
Yeah.
Then you get a name Nate or an exposure 10 or whatever it may be, or these days a 3510, and then you then graduate to pre-powers,
yes,
don't you?
Exactly. And you aspire to them, don't you?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But with this, I think actually to answer my own question is, it does things really well. Great current delivery, great power, great dynamics. It's just a bit clinical. It's just a little bit clinical.
Yeah.
And the worst cliche in the whole of the hi-fi industry is when people start talking about musicality.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
It's not very musical for me, and I don't find myself tapping my feet very much to it.
Yeah.
Now, why is that? I don't really know, but it just doesn't quite float my boat.
Yeah.
And that's a very subjective thing to say. And as I say, it's an incredible amp. There's no brilliantly designed, ticks all the boxes except there's that one, which is I don't get that. In time to the music with it.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I think there's a thin line, as they say in Spinal Tap, between clever and stupid, isn't there?
Mm.
And I think that in terms of hi-fi, this is on that there's a sort of thin line between being a subtle amplifier and being a bland one.
Yes,
and I think that actually it's a subtle amp, but you need to partner it with quite sort of I don't know, I wouldn't say aggressive speakers, but they need to be quite feisty and engaging sounding speakers, I think. Also I think, because I heard the PM-10 in my own house and also in the Marantz Dem Room in Eindhoven, so you need to put power into it. You need to play loud music in a large room and take advantage of its power.
Sure.
And in a way, I think we both heard a while back. We heard the Rotel Mitchie X5, which was Rotel's almost rival to it, which is this huge integrated.
Yeah.
And the Mitchie was also, I found, similar.
It really is.
It
really is. It's that sound characteristic.
Yeah,
isn't
it's kind
it?
of very delicate and sort of subtle and not immediately feisty and fun. It's not like a Name Nate one which just says, "Look at me, hello, here I am." So yeah, I think it's, for some people you could say it's a bit of a grower. Others might say it's a little clinical or dispassionate sounding. But when it's at its kind of full pomp, with big speakers in a large room, I think it's a really impressive sounding amp. But it's one of those kind of grey areas. I know someone who has actually bought one of these. He's a long-term Marantz aficionado. He had the previous generation of preamp and power amps, and he loves it, thinks it's fantastic.
Yeah, I get it. I can understand why.
Yeah.
I really can. It's a deeply impressive product.
Yeah.
And so Zamichi, that's a deeply impressive product.
Yeah.
But sometimes Hi-Fi is a little bit more personal.
Yeah.
And I've tried it with some different speakers. I've tried it with the ATC. Tried it with the Mission 770s, which we reviewed recently.
Yeah.
And just not quite there for me.
Yeah.
Just not quite. It's a little bit like I'm trying to think of a good car analogy. So if you imagine if you had a car that sort of did almost everything, and every toy, every gadget in the world, but was just a little bit soulless to drive.
Yeah.
Then that would be it. That would kind of be my plenty of power, but almost sort of just you plenty of power. You don't want to drive it fast.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a strange analogy.
No, I know exactly what you mean. There are some cars which are hugely capable.
Yes.
And have amazingly good, but are just less fun than a kind of sort of Triumph Spitfire with a tuned up carburetors.
And I could almost say maybe even something like a Bentley.
Yeah.
So I mean, really well spec, really well equipped, great looking car, brilliantly built. But you get in it and it's just not quite as much fun as a Spitfire.
Yeah, or a sort of Honda VTEC or something.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, I think that's a great point, and it sort of touches on something maybe we should talk about in another video about the sort of what is Hi-Fi for, and who is it for?
Yes.
And should we be talking more about who, the Hi-Fi that we're reviewing is designed for? Because sometimes it can be great, but just not for us.
Of course. Yeah. And you know what? I mean, one of the things as well, which actually we had talked about before, and we've talked about on Hi-Fi Riff before, is this is a 7-gram product, which seems like a lot for an integrated amp.
Yeah.
This is going to last you a lifetime.
Yeah.
This isn't disposable Hi-Fi.
Yeah.
If you like this is your last amplifier, isn't it? It will just last you forever. It's never going to break down.
No, it's not. And it's got everything you need in terms of the sort of power output. I mean,
and a million inputs.
Yeah, a million inputs. Really good moving coil input as well.
Yes, we haven't mentioned that.
Sort of Ken Ishiwata told me they put a lot of trouble into getting that right. Very good headphone amp built in, and 400 watts into 4 ohms. 200 into 8. It'll drive any speaker really loud.
Yes.
And it's totally unflappable at high volumes. You can put it with a harder speaker and it'll still keep driving hard.
Yes.
It grips very well, and it's got a lovely kind of delicate treble and a good mid-band. But yeah, it has a slightly more relaxed and mellow, sort of laid-back kind of character, I think, than some of the amps that we like. And that's really a matter of taste, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah, it's got kind of like a pure audio mode as well.
Yeah.
So you can shut off all the other things and just have it so that it's a straight through, if you like. I hadn't actually mentioned the headphone amp. It does have a dedicated headphone amp. So if you if you have it by your bedside table, then you can have the ultimate headphone amplifier.
Yes.
But yes, it reinforces your house.
Mike's top tip. Just found a great headphone amp. So
a 23 kilogram headphone amplifier.
Yeah.
But no, I like it, but it's not quite for me.
Okay.
I think would be my kind of bottom line.
Yeah.
Do we want to give it a riffometer score?
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think? What do you reckon?
I'm gonna go for 8.5.
Okay. That's a little bit generous for me, but I'm going to give it an 8, and I'll tell you why. Because you can't knock the build quality. I love the concept. I love the fact it's got this balanced phono stage, linear supply, these discrete supplies for the mono amps, all of this terrific stuff in there.
Yeah.
Ultimate power station of an amplifier.
Yeah.
Just not quite there. Just not quite my thing.
Yes, it needs another 5 boxes to be your thing.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Extra 5 boxes, another 2 points, and it would get a perfect 10.
Quite. But I think it definitely has a market. I think there's an awful lot of people out there who will think it's the best thing since sliced bread.
Lovely bit of kit.
Amazing. And on that note, thanks very much indeed again for watching Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff, and we'll see you at the next one. Thanks very much. Bye.